Hello, everyone. Welcome back to D1 Crashout. I had to re-record this because I yapped so long that I ran out of footage, and I did not want to play more Valorant today. So here we are. But big idea is that when you ask for advice, actually want advice, and that doesn't mean that the advice is just reinforcing what you already believe, but that you see it as new perspective, as feedback, and something which is commenting on your situation outside of knowing every single variable. It's difficult to not be understood, and it's also difficult to actually accept feedback and be vulnerable and be open to people telling you something new. And also, we all want to be right, as a very generalized statement. That means doing things that we believe we are right for us, doing things that are good for other people, that are objectively correct, and generally speaking, being right in an academic sense, right? So, in that active pursuit, someone might see advice as feedback in which you might want to contest it, which is completely normal if your friend is stupid, to each their own. If you want to just be like, no, that's actually terrible advice and I hope you never say it again, you can. But on the other hand of that, you can still learn things from bad advice. And my best analogy for this is if anyone has that friend that's always getting into a relationship and it just never seemed to make it work out, and maybe it's because they are just a terrible person and they treat people terribly, or maybe because they choose terrible people, or something in between. But even in listening to what you might consider bad advice from a bad source for someone who is not in the situation that you want to be in, you can still learn things from that, right? If I'm telling you about all those terrible ways that I was treated, how my significant other never respected what I had to say, were so absolved in what they believed to be right, that they wouldn't compromise on anything, that their life was so perfect, and that my feelings never got hurt, you would think that that person was a terrible person, in which that might be right, or you might not be getting all the context of it. Maybe I was delusional and I was always worried about things that they never did, and I was letting my relationship anxiety get in the way of them living their life. Maybe I felt like they never made time for me, or the person was really busy and they didn't make me a priority, or maybe they couldn't, and you got into the relationship expecting them to move mountains for you, when really they're just a busy person and they told you up front, or maybe they didn't tell you, that they were going to be very busy, and then they became busy. Life happens, and sometimes it's just not the right time. Loki, another one of my crash outs is that everybody likes to say, oh, right person, wrong time, even when maybe it just was never the right person. Or maybe you'll be like, oh, we're just not compatible right now. Or maybe you were never compatible. People like to look at things very optimistically and say that I could just work with any person, that everything is sweet and that life is just good. But my honest response is that maybe some people just weren't meant to be. Maybe some people aren't compatible because they didn't want to make it work. And that's completely okay. But this is not dating advice, the show. I am going to say something about a topic, and whether you agree or disagree does not matter, as long as you actually think about something and you gain some perspective. So, back to the crashing out. Advice is not necessarily feedback as much as it is new perspective. I think that is a healthy way to look at it. Because when somebody is telling you something, they don't know every single thing. They only know what you give them. And you might be a very meticulous observationist and you might give really good information, but they also can't see the future. So advice is mostly direction, right? Oh, you're always getting injured. Maybe you should try lifting less or exercising less. But there's other symptoms. You could not be sleeping enough. You could not be eating enough. You just might, be working really, really hard and you're working too much. And even if you fit it into a smaller window, you still might work too much. And the thing is, that person doesn't know for sure, but they're just giving you a healthy suggestion. And that's not exclusive to lifting or exercise. That is true anywhere where, okay, you're not getting the jobs you want. Maybe you apply to more jobs or you get rejected from every single job. You have a crummy resume, but people don't know. Even doctors, and their whole job is to diagnose, do a practice where they're basically guessing and checking, where you say something which is very likely based off of the symptoms. They try to treat it. If the treatment doesn't work, then it isn't that thing. And that is the whole point, that people don't know everything. And that means if somebody gives you advice, that isn't your opportunity to hold them accountable for things that you do not do. And if it doesn't work out perfectly, they're like, oh, wow, you suck. You give terrible advice, and none of this is my fault. No, they didn't know everything. That was just an educated guess, right? That also doesn't mean I'm going to ask you for advice because I think I'm crazy, but I want someone to unconditionally support me. This is usually when you surround yourself with people who are like-minded to you, and this is good because it reduces relationship friction. It makes your life easier. Like, you're not going to agree with everyone because people come from different circumstances and find different ways to live their lives relative to those circumstances. A high-level example. Right out of slavery, African Americans, I think, is the term that people should use for them back then, maybe. Free recently, didn't have access to any resources coming out of slavery. I mean, if you got kidnapped and then just dropped in Albania, that would be the equivalent after you got whipped and forced to work for years on end. But those generations lost the skills to be able to make lives for themselves, including the education, which made life very difficult for people who were freely no longer enslaved. So what do you do when you have nothing to your name? You have no house, no property, no ability to set up for yourself. You either A, sharecrop and get used for cheap labor again, or you B, steal, hope people don't catch you, and try to turn that little bit amount of money into something more when the world is actively out against you. Now, you might say, oh, it's bad to steal from other people, right? You didn't earn that thing. But what else were they to do? And that's when the line gets blurry. This is another video where I'll talk about the gray, right? Not everything is just black and white. But for the sake of this video, talking about advice and people hopefully doing what they believe to be right is subjective. We all like to believe it is an objective matter, but it's not. I could never make any mistakes in a relationship, and I could be perfect, and I could never put any pressure on the person, but the person can still hate me and be delusional and have real feelings that may not be grounded in real things, but the way that I treat them might be conducive to that, or lack thereof. Maybe they need things to go wrong in order for them to feel secure. Like, it's too perfect, it's too good to be true. And that's a real thing that humans deal with, because humans are imperfect, and humans struggle with objectivity. There's a whole list of things, this is college education, but that you learn that humans have biases, like ladybugs. Like, oh, ladybug landed on my foot, something is good is going to happen to me, and then I find a penny on the ground. Maybe I was going to find that penny either way, but I'm going to attribute that from the ladybug, where, we're not good at separating correlation with cause and effect, right? We just make it all up in our head. So that is a big rant way to say that right is not necessarily black and white as well. And advice is not telling you what to do or what to think as much as it is giving you a suggestion, giving you maybe feedback, but more importantly, giving you new perspective, looking at things from a different angle. And the other mediums that people use advice for, I genuinely think are wrong. Yes, you might be asking for advice from somebody that you like, as in you think highly of them, and you might want to hear a certain thing to reinforce the behavior that you're doing to say that you're not crazy. And that might not happen. And you might still want to do the thing and completely ignore their advice entirely. And it's okay to do that. And it's also okay to have a different opinion from someone. Whoa, big boom. And that's the crash out. At least in terms of the advice side. The other half of things is I hope that people actually do the things that they believe are right. I tell my students that it has never been easier to access information and accurate information and correct information, but it's also never been easier to access misinformation and things that are just blatantly wrong. An algorithm, so for example, multiple ones actually, that run social media might reinforce certain ideas because you engage with the content that you want to see, and that creates logic circles. Well, not logic, but culture circles, where you're only reinforcing your own behavior because you've been enforcing the idea that you want to see it, and you might not open up your perspective for more. So, example of how you might want to control your algorithm, but in terms of real life, don't do that to people. Don't see someone and be like, okay, this is my opinion, and this is the objectively correct opinion, and I'm going to push that on you, and push. You cannot control what other people think. You can try, and it is perfectly normal and actually encouraged to try to open up your ideas, to not only receive feedback, but to also open up your perspective. And a lot of people would benefit from an open mind, but there just are some bridges that one may not cross. I could tell you, hey, it is in your best interest to drive slower because it might help you, survive, react quicker to crashes, all that stuff. And if you just want to get from A to B and you don't want to think about your mortality every single time you get into the car, you're going to continue to speed and drive fast. So it doesn't matter how sound the advice it is, as much as it matters how it falls on the ears. And if someone chooses to be illogical, or whether they just are illogical, or they just don't want to hear the advice and they value their way of living more than the advice or the respect of the person, then they're going to do that. And that's okay. You can't force people to think or act a certain way. That's just how it is. So healthy suggestions, maybe healthy intervention, especially when it comes to like substance and abuse and all those things. Like, it gets to a point where you just got call the cops. But you cannot force things, hopefully, onto people unless you're a parent, gray area. And advice and suggestions. So 2 main points. Next one, live your life doing what you think is right. You might never know what is the perfect thing to do in any situation. You take your best guess and then, you roll with the consequences. I'm going to go to this job, and maybe another great job is just around the corner, but this is the best job that I have for me right now. And then I accept the job offer, and then I get a new invitation that you didn't know that there was a better job right around the corner. You're like, oh wow, this is a really great job, I'm going to take it. And you commit to it, and you have to live that out, and that sucks, but that's life. And the other half of that is, okay, I'm going, like all my friends are doing it, I'm really happy, I'm going to try this thing. And you know what? It actually made me feel terrible, or maybe even I had an allergic reaction to it, but you didn't know until you tried it. So like, don't beat yourself up being like, oh, I should have known better. I'm like, you people always know better. There's a lot of people who ask for advice and they already know what they want to do. They just want to feel heard. And that's a completely normal thing to do, even if it's is one of my pet peeves. I'm like, if you're asking for advice, you should actually be looking for advice, not just looking to fight me for my beliefs. But, maybe that's just me. But I also think that judgment has a place in this world. So, 2 sides of the coin. Going back to the right idea, hopefully you live your life doing what you think is right. And you also live your life trying to be better and actively improve in areas. If you make a mistake, spill coffee on someone's lap. One's is like, oh man, I'm so sorry. And like, it's burning and they're dying. Oh no. And they're probably going to be mad at you. And they might, and if you, apologize enough, they might feel better. But if you keep on spilling coffee on them, they're going to be unhappy. And that, in and of itself, says everything about, even though our actions are irreparable, you can make good of them by trying to be better and actively being better. Everyone's patience is different, so you might burn some bridges in your pursuit of being a better person, but it goes a long way to try to improve actively. And this doesn't stand alone for just making mistakes, but also for just areas of life. People like people who are passionate, who actually have a drive and want to do something. And also, why would you do something that you actively know is bad for you? You would look at someone crazily for drinking the fumes straight out of their car and straight into their mouth because, like, no one does that. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's really stupid. But a lot of people drink, and they might do marijuana because it's illegal, and they get that temporary benefit, or they might doom scrolling, very common, and they might get that immediate benefit, and it feels good in the moment. But if you drink like even 1 to 2 drinks like every single day, or you like hit a really hard blackout like frequently, or like once a week, and you drink a lot, you get more gray matter in your brain. It negatively impacts your cognition. Marijuana, your dopamine centers, and your ability to regulate your own behavior. Not to mention your lungs if you smoke, especially with people who like vape or do nicotine. Like, it's bad for your lungs. I don't know how clear that is, but people do it anyway because they'd rather the easy thing, which is continuing to do it, and it makes them feel good. And also kicking the habit is more difficult because they reinforce it so much. So it's a difficult world out there. Do what's right. Do what makes it's easier to do what's right than to have to recover from the multiple things that you did that were wrong, right? This is all about behavior, which I've already talked about. But same thing with information too. If you're not sure about something, don't tell someone it is an objective fact. And also, hopefully, people have open minds enough to actually think about the things that they do and make an informed decision. and educate themselves, right? Curiosity is so valuable, right? People who are inventors, who are innovative, they do something that nobody else has done, right? You're never going to ever do something new by just following the curve. That's why everyone and their mom wants to be a startup founder right now, because it's really accessible, and also it's really easy to do nowadays with the technology available. So I'm getting off track. I'm going to cut this shorter so I actually don't run out of footage this time, but take advice as perspective. Maybe a suggestion, maybe a feedback, but please reframe what advice might actually mean to you, or at least recognize what you are seeking when you're asking for advice, and make that a clear ask so you don't end up disappointed. People don't just read minds. Try to do what's actually actively best for you, right? Lead your life with good intentions, and if you make a mistake, it's okay, because you don't know any better. It's not guaranteed that you're just going to know. It's so easy to look at things in post hoc and be like, oh man, I should have known to not drive so fast, so I didn't hit that car. But, you got away with it 30 million times before. I'm like, what makes this next one different? So, humans are reactionary. Nah, oh well. Try to do what's right. What you believe is right. Try to actively be better. Take advice with a grain of salt. That is all. That is my crash out. Bye bye.